I'm going to ask for a nod from my panelists if you can see my screen. Okay? Okay, perfect. Thank you. Cool. We are getting started, everyone. Good afternoon and welcome to today's panel session, Women in Leadership, Women's Equality Day. I am today's panel host. There we go. Laverne Hanfield, that's my name. I'm the Employability and Events Coordinator for the Lancaster University Management School Career Service. Today, we have three amazing members of the Lancaster University Management School's Leadership in Residence program joining us as panelists. I will invite them to introduce themselves soon, but first I want to cover some housekeeping items before we begin. As you will be hearing about our panelists' experience today, we invite you to ask them questions as you may want to know more. Please submit your questions in the chat, or if you are brave enough and would like to ask your questions audibly, you can also use the raise your hand feature, which you will find by clicking on reactions at the top of your screen if you're joining from a desktop or laptop. If we have time toward the end, we will answer any additional questions, but you can submit them at any time and you are encouraged to do so. And if you'd like to ask your question audibly, we recommend that you make a note of it somewhere so you can ask it when we open the floor for questions at that time. Lastly, today's session is being recorded. The slides that you're seeing now will not be shared, but the recording will be live and shared to attendees and those who have registered and were unable to attend today within a week of today's session. So into our session for today. Each year, Women's Equality Day takes place on the 26th of August to commemorate women's suffrage and acknowledge the bravery and drive demonstrated by those who fought for equal voting rights for women. We have postdated our celebration of Women's Equality Day, but despite the fact that the actual holiday has passed, that doesn't mean that we can't recognize it today and every day. Now, over 100 years since the voting rights for women were granted, there are still areas of everyday life that are being fought to make equal. Strides must still be made for industries, jobs, and educational opportunities to be equal, despite women making significant contributions in these areas throughout history and everyday quality of life. Today, LUMS Careers hold our celebration of Women's Equality Day by hosting this panel session to recognize some women we have identified as making strides in their careers and their industries to showcase to students and our wider LUMS and Lancaster University audience. They are part of the LUMS Leaders in Residence program. And if you are not aware of the LUMS Leaders in Residence program, it is a network of nationally and internationally renowned leaders from public sector, private sector, and third sector organizations who inspire our students as they identify their career aspirations, as we're doing today, collaborate with academic colleagues to deliver inspiring and innovative guest lectures, support the school in its drive to enhance its relationship with industry and our engagement with the local and regional communities. These are just a few of the ways in which they support LUMS, and you can read more about the program and view our network of leaders on the Leaders in Residence webpage, which is easily accessible by searching the university's webpage for Leaders in Residence. Now, to get started on today's panel session, I am delighted to welcome Jackie Arnold, Jackie Jackson, and Joe Telfer as today's panelists. And instead of me introducing them, I will stop sharing my screen and I will open the space and invite them to introduce themselves. And we will start with Jackie Arnold.
Hello, everyone. I'm delighted to be with you this afternoon. It's always a pleasure to join with these types of events at Lancaster University. As I mentioned, I am Jackie Arnold. I, as you can probably tell by looking at me, I have a long history of work experience that I'm more than happy to share with you. By profession, I'm a chartered accountant. But during my career, I have progressed into a variety of different roles, from accountancy clearly through to strategic roles, leading strategy development in organisations, and also in particular an ESG agenda, which at the time it was my agenda, was very much in its infancy and not as high profile as it is now, so has been a real struggle. Naturally, I started my career in practice. Actually, I had a very brief spell in the public sector at the beginning of my career, and I then moved into the power industry in electricity generation, where I worked for an organisation which was based in the UK. We were the first. Privatisation of the electricity industry is perhaps a little bit disputed at the moment, but at the time we were the first privatised power generation facility in the UK, using technology that hadn't previously been used in the UK, and as a consequence of that, it was a very high-profile project for me to be involved in, and was definitely one of the real highlights of my career. I spent 10 years in that role, changing from an initial joining as company accountant and ending up as managing director of one of the facilities in that organisation. And during that time, I saw several changes in the trading rules, renegotiated power trading contracts, and took the company through a change in shareholder ownership to a 100% owned American organisation at the time. That was a fabulous experience. Loved working with an American organisation. They were incredibly demanding, but equally incredibly rewarding if you worked hard. And I was very sad when that came to an end, to kind of no fault of my own, but there was a very difficult time. None of you will be old enough to remember, but there were real problems with a company called Enron and TXU. They were American companies operating here very substantially in the power industry, with an auditing firm, Arthur Andersen, who got into real problems at the time. And I mean, we had particular issues because our power off-taker was TXU, and we were audited by Arthur Andersen out of London. So we were kind of heavily affected by that. But as a consequence of that, not just the organisation I worked for, but all the American organisations in the power industry decided to cut their losses and pulled out of the UK and substantially Europe, to be honest, at the time. So I managed the kind of play down of their involvement and the transfer back to the US of the organisation, and was during that process offered a role in the defence sector for BAE Systems, based in the submarine yard in Barrow-in-Furness. I joined BAE as chief accountant and spent 17 or 18 years in that organisation, again in a variety of different roles, starting off with very much the kind of core financial position, which I found quite difficult, having operated in a much broader commercial role in power. So during that time, I actively negotiated moving into a more strategic role, doing the financial modelling for the longer term strategy for the business, ultimately then owning the strategic agenda. And when I assumed responsibility for the strategic agenda, it was at a time when, our customer, the Ministry of Defence, had really instructed us to simplify the strategy, concentrate on delivering the submarine programme, which in itself was delivering significant challenge to us, i.e. in 5 years we needed to double our workforce and completely remodel the site infrastructure while delivering the submarine programme. So my focus became very much on ensuring that we had the strategic initiatives in place to enable us to do that. And part of that included taking the community with us, because we were not going to be able to meet those challenges on our own. We needed the community to come with us. We needed to support them in their ambition for the local area, but they also needed to understand our requirements and support us. We did double our workforce. The site infrastructure isn't quite finished yet, but it's substantially done. So you might put a big tick in the box there. The community, however, I don't think has benefited to the extent it should, and there is still work to do there. After 18 years, I had some personal issues. My parents were poorly, they needed some support, so I decided I would leave my substantive role in BA systems and give them the support they needed for that period of time. And I was approached by the Vice-Chancellor at the University of Cumbria because I'd worked very closely with the Vice-Chancellor as we were both members of the Cumbria Local Enterprise Partnership Board. And during one of our local enterprise partnership meetings, I'd actually challenged the Vice-Chancellor and said, you know, as businesses, we would really like to engage with our local universities, but the offer that you have is not meeting the requirements of our business. Is there not something we could do to work together and mutually support each other through that? And as a consequence, she asked me if I'd go and work with her to do precisely that. So I spent about 3 years, maybe 4 years with the university, started as a professor of practice, ended up as a pro-vice-chancellor, created the Institute for Business within the university and worked very closely with the strategic partners, business partners within the geography to ensure that we had a syllabus offering that suited the demands of the businesses locally. And at that point, I largely stood down from full-time work. I am still and remain a non-executive director with the Cumberland Building Society, have been there for 4.5 years. Love that. Love working with a company that has the morals and values of a mutual organisation within a community that I feel passionately about, and that is something which will continue. I also do still continue to do some work with BA Systems, supporting that, particularly ESG agenda, and I do some kind of coaching and mentoring activities with principally women in senior leadership roles in organisations throughout the country. So that's me, Yvette.
Thank you so much. Now I've taken so many notes to ask you things later. Jackie Jackson?
I can't follow that. So I'm Jackie Jackson. I'm a partner in Thomas Jardine & Co, which is our own 5th generation family business. So in the mid-80s, I left my banking career, which had no future for me, I didn't think, as a female at the time, to join the family firm, which was grocery and retail. So myself and my husband started to operate the family business. So I'm definitely from an SME background, small businesses. I'm a non-exec with a mid-sized family firm, and I'm a productivity ambassador in the UK for SMEs to raise productivity agenda. So in this journey from leaving a banking career to join the family firm, we transitioned it into a multi-award winning convenience retail chain by adapting to the marketplace around us at that time. We sold that business in the mid-20s, but keeping the properties. So after 20 years of operating it, we sold that, keeping the properties. I then had my dalliance, I suppose, with academia. I did a master's degree as a route to validating what I'd done in operating a business for 20 years. I thought I'll get a certificate to say what I'd done. So we got a master's degree and then a dalliance with PhDs. Oof, wow, that was tricky. That was interestingly tricky. Didn't achieve the PhD, but learned an awful lot. I've got a book chapter and a few academic journals. So I get that world of PhDs. But then I became vice chairman of SPA UK, which is the convenience retail chain. So that's mostly family businesses and large and small businesses collaborating to work together to achieve more than the sum of its parts. So that was my real understanding of the way strategic boards work, with a network of independents of about 2,500 different business owners networking together and trying to get them to go in one direction. You could imagine it's quite tricky. So that was really, really interesting stuff. Then we get to about sort of 5-10 years ago, this dalliance with, I became head of family business programs at Lancaster University. I'm currently an honorary teaching fellow with Lancaster University, learned an awful lot about leadership of SMEs, leadership of family firms, from an academic perspective as well as a real world perspective, and how do they juxtapose their positions. Then we have my sons join the family business, and we create co-working space, consultancy, and I have another part of the family that runs coffee roasting business and cafes. So we're all small businesses, we all work together, and that's my perspective of large and small.
Thank you so much, Jackie. Small businesses, but definitely an empire. And Jo Telfer.
Hi, everyone. It's absolutely lovely to be here. I always really look forward to coming and spending time with anyone at Lancaster University, and the students in particular. I've got a long history with Lancaster. I did my bachelor's degree at Lancaster back in the 90s. More recently did my master's, and I've just commenced a PhD at the management school. So Jackie Jackson, maybe you and I need to talk about what I need to be careful of to move forward on the PhD. So really lovely to be here. So Jo Telfer, I'm not called Jackie, I'm called Jo, but I'm still allowed to be on the call. Laverne tells me. I work at Sellafield Limited, which is part of the nuclear industry up in the kind of northwest of Cumbria. I'm head of behavioural insights, which I think is the most fascinating job in the world. But then I would say that, of course, what we do in behavioural insights, myself and my team, we work at all levels of the organisation, and we do occasionally work in other nuclear organisations up and down the UK. In particular, at senior and quite strategic levels. And we look at the especially acute, the especially troublesome behavioural and cultural opportunities and problems and challenges that we have. Myself and my team are a group of organisational psychologists, which is, again, a really interesting area to be working in. We've got a really broad range of psychologically based skills and experiences, really to help the organisation shift whenever it needs to shift. And we all know that we're in a VUCA world where companies, organisations, groups, communities need to constantly shift. So we're very busy. We're very busy, as you can imagine. And it's all about helping my organisation achieve our mission. And our mission is to create a clean and safe environment for future generations. So what a very laudable mission to be a part of. So if anything I've said there, you'd like to reach out to me offline, if you've got an interest in org psych, if you've got an interest in nuclear or anything else I say, please do reach out to me. You're very welcome to, whether it's through Laverne or whether it's through LinkedIn. I'd be really happy to have conversations with you offline if anything I say resonates. Laverne, back to you.
Thank you so very much. All three of you. I'm so excited to have this conversation. I'm kind of interested into how you got from where you were to where you are. Jackie Arnold and Jackie Jackson, you both mentioned that you started out kind of in the banking accountancy world. And Jo, I may have missed it as to what your bachelor's was in, but I'm intrigued as to why you got into those specific fields to begin with. I'll start with Jo, since we just ended with you.
Yeah. My first degree was in org psych, organizational psychology. So it was always what I do and who I'm meant to be. If you like, I didn't have a big career change or topic change or anything like that. And that is just, people fascinate me, organizations fascinate me. The dynamics, when you put the two together, really fascinates me. It's all about people. It's all about what make them tick. It's all about how irrational sometimes people can be. And it's kind of grappling and wrestling with that perceived irrationality, perceived lack of logic in how we make decisions. So it was always part of my DNA, I think, even from when I was a lot younger, in my 20s, that this was generally the line of work that I wanted to go in. And just through my career, I've just kept doing what I knew I did well. and it's something that maybe we'll touch on more and more in the time we've got together, which is I've just worked very hard to be the best Jo I could possibly be. And there was always a sense in my head, whether it's a gender thing, I do think that plays a part. There was always a sense for me that I had to be twice as good as other people, to be seen as equally good to other people. Jackie, I'd be interested if that's maybe a very personal, unfair statement to make, but it's certainly a sense I've had throughout my career, possibly a gender-related sentiment that I've had about having to be twice as good.
Yeah, Jackie, Arnold, I am intrigued to hear what your thoughts on that as well.
Yeah, so I'd 100% agree with Jo on that. I think that well, certainly I, and obviously Jo the same, always seemed to feel that I had to have all the answers, that I had to be super prepared, that I had to be able to give kind of instant responses and reactions, because I would be judged as not really good enough if I didn't do that. And it was a long time, to be honest, and working with maybe mentors and coaches to be persuaded that actually, is that happening with everyone else in the room? Do they all have that? Do you have that expectation of them? So why should you have that expectation of yourself? And so don't be worried to say, I'm not quite sure about that one. Let me think about it. And don't expect to have an instant response all the time. And ask questions yourself. Don't just expect all the questions to come your way and you to have all the answers to that. And that, I have to say that the moment that was pointed out to me, that was quite transformational for me. It made a huge difference to my overall kind of approach to matters moving forwards. However, I spent all my career in industries that were very much male dominated, and until very recently it was rare for me not to be only female in a room, around a table, at a meeting, at a conference, and therefore some of that pressure did continue, and the fight did seem also to continue to an extent. It was something I adjusted to, but it's really strange that, having spent all that time where it nearly always was just me, latterly we were seeing the emergence of more female talent, opportunity flowing that way, more diversity in the room. And that just felt completely natural. It wasn't anything that ever felt strange to me. It felt completely natural, very satisfying, and very pleasing to see. But I empathise completely with everything you've said, Jo, because I'm sure it is gender. I'm sure it's not purely restricted to females, but I think it's probably much more common.
Jackie Jackson, any thoughts?
Yeah, I kind of agree with all the comments so far, as certainly for me, starting in a banking career, my choice was, I was brought up in the family firm. I kind of liked the family business, but my dad didn't. So he very much influenced me to get a proper job, whatever a proper job was, something professional, go and do something proper. So I applied for a job with a bank and I got it. So there wasn't really much more thinking to it than that at that point. And then discovered, no, this isn't, I'm not going to stay in the box that they want me to stay in. So how do I change that box? There's more to it for me. It was going to be too difficult to fight against the system that was there. So I actually then jumped out to join the family firm, much to the horror of my father. He was horrified. He thought that was a death nail in an industry at that point that was seen to be dying. So you wouldn't join a dying industry. Grocery was dead because of the rise of the supermarkets. So he just didn't see it. Whereas I saw it as full of opportunity. But then that's my mindset, is opportunity. And then I think what Jo said there of wanting to be, or having to work twice as hard, or wanting to constantly be the best you can be, I don't know if that's a personality trait, a bit of that as well, that regardless, if I'd been born male, I think I would have still been the same person. But there were definite barriers for me at that point in life, and I hope that those barriers have changed, but I don't know. I hope they have. But for me, it was then I was up against being too young as well as female to be able to make my own decisions in my own business within the supply chain and the network. I was looked at as probably a bit too immature as well. So age came against me, being too young at that point a little bit as well. But for me, it was about being the best you can be wherever you are, and that you earn your merit by being good at what you do, not by being female. That wasn't good enough. You needed to be good and female, whatever you were, because very much playing in a male arena. The reason I got onto the board originally within the SPA network that I was part of as a voluntary thing was definitely, we need one of those females. So, and I was there. I was pretty outspoken anyway. I had a voice and I was prepared to use it. So that opened the door for me. And it would be rude not to then be good at what you're doing while you're there. You know, I don't want to be a token. I want to be good at what I do in the full arena. I don't want to be just good in the women's arena. I want to be good in the arena. So that is my constant. I want to benchmark myself against whoever is best at that moment. So that's been my driving factor. And also I'm very curious. So I'm always asking questions. I always want to know more, to the irritation of some people, but that's how I feel I need to learn. I need to keep learning. So that keeps me wanting to be better, but not because I'm female, because I just want to be better. Yeah.
That is lovely. I love that. You touched on a really good point, Jackie Jackson. Also to the audience, if you hear me say Jackie A and Jackie J, it's Jackie Arnold and Jackie Jackson. Of it being perceived that even in your own business, you were too young to be making those leadership decisions. And Jackie Arnold, you mentioned that you do some mentoring and coaching for senior women in leadership, if I'm not mistaken. And this is all about leadership and the equality in leadership. It's almost like an arbitrary word, but also not really. We all have this definition in our minds or through Google what leadership actually is, but what are those characteristics of leadership? And I'm also interested to find out from each of you what your individual leadership styles are. Whoever would like to go first, I welcome you to do so.
So I'm happy to, Laverne, but putting that title to what is leadership, I guess that's something that you can pick up from any textbook. I'd probably just give you my thoughts on kind of where do I establish that, because for me a leader is someone who can, you know, take a team forward, who can create a team of individuals, be whatever size, at whatever level, in whatever organisation, who can inspire them, who can help them to be the best they can, who can provide direction, who can give some, you know, overarching strategic vision for where they would like to take their part of the organisation, whatever, and you know, and ensure that they can enable that team to be precisely what Joe and Jackie have just said, to be the best of themselves that they can be within that environment. And that would, I like to think, that would encapsulate my leadership style, because you know, I'm a strong believer of the fact that a successful leader is only as successful as the team of individuals that they have sat around them. And therefore, you know, my focus has always been very much on ensuring you have the right people on side and that they share your vision. And if they feel that they have any issues, that they're confident and happy to challenge you, and that we can have discussions to determine how that might work moving forwards and collectively learn from each other. And, you know, I think it's Simon Sinek says you should always recruit for attitude and train for skills. And I'm a huge believer in that, you know, having people together with that right attitude who individually do always want to be the best that they can be is the perfect place for someone in a leadership position to be sat. And that, you know, or maybe that sounds a bit, you know, motherhood and apple pie. I'm not sure, because it's not all pleasant. You know, there are aspects of being a leader that are really difficult, and when you have individuals in the team who, you know, don't share the values, don't openly engage in the conversation and the challenge, then, you know, there are things that you need to do to deal with that. But that's an equally important facet of being a leader, that you're visibly seen to A, give people every opportunity, but B, to deal with any consequences of individuals in the team who are letting other team members down. So, you know, I don't want to depict it as all simple and nice and straightforward, because that's absolutely not the case. There are difficult things that need to be dealt with, and it's crucially important that you are able to do that. I'm not sure if that answers your question or not, though.
It does. It does. Jill, Jackie, any other additions?
The only thing I would agree with Jackie says, it's a very complicated thing, leadership. But I think for me, it's a leader is somebody that can inspire other people to get to that vision. You know, they've got that clear vision, as Jackie said. They know where they're going. They probably don't quite know how they're going to get there, hence the challenge. But if they believe that they can achieve it, you get followers. So you're not a leader if nobody's following you, and they're not following. You want them to be following you by choice, not by stick, you know. So it's kind of, you have to inspire people by belief. But there are times when you have to make very, very, very tough decisions, and you have to make them decisively and quite quickly. And we've had a lot of that recently, where organisations have been massively interrupted and changed, where decisions have had to be made quite quickly, and you have to be strong and inspire confidence that it's going to be okay. And I think confidence, belief, inspiring, and knowing where you're going, and really understanding the talent of other people, and knowing where you're not good at something. Don't try to be it. If you're not good at it, let the person that is do it. That kind of thing. And it's not easy, so, but it's worth going for.
Could I just add one more thing onto that? Fully support what Jackie and Jackie have just gone through. The only addition I would like to make is something that I'm feeling very strongly at the moment, and I don't know if it's a post-COVID thing. I'm not quite sure why. I'm getting a lot more of this at the moment, and that is the requirement for a leader, and something I work very hard to try and do is the empowerment piece, to empower members of the team, and almost to help that team member draw out for them the art of the possible. Because often I have team members or colleagues in the broader organisation who haven't quite thought of or who don't quite believe in the art of the possible for themselves as an individual. I don't know if it's a confidence thing. It might actually be a post-COVID thing, because I think a lot of people's confidence has been knocked coming back to work and getting back into having to influence other people again. But there is a role in leadership as well for that empowerment piece. And it's something that I would describe myself in terms of my own leadership priorities. It would be empowerment, it would be support. Absolutely, it would be making the difficult decisions. You can't run away from them. I don't run towards them maybe as often as I should, but I try not to run away from them as well.
I like that. I'm going to ponder that some more after this. I'm also intrigued, again, back to your experiences in kind of once you started to go for that first leadership role, and then the next one, and then the next one, how you identified that step was for you to be in that leadership role in your various organizations that you're in. I'm going to ask Jill.
It feels like bingo when you're picking our name, and she's going to pick me, she's going to pick me. But for me, it was a very natural thing. I knew I wanted to make a difference. I knew I had a fire in my belly, to use a phrase. The fact that the gender I was born with happens to be female never really was part of my decision making in terms of wanting to keep going. Again, it was very much about being the best Jo I could be. And that's why I just kept going and kept what I call fighting the good fight, because at times it does feel like a fight, but it's a righteous fight, because I know a lot of the things I do are for the benefit of the organisation and the benefit of people around me, other females around me who are looking for those role models, and we don't have an awful lot to choose from. So I wanted to make sure that I was one of them.
I love that. Jackie Arnold?
So I guess that's a really strange one, because we've talked about this theme of, pressure to perform, wanting to be the best you could. And I would say that right through my career, that has been my approach. This is my role. I'm going to do it to the best of my ability. And always really being recognised for that overall approach, and actually always wanting to go one step further. So, quite often looking for some element of additional responsibility that I could add to the kind of role that I was undertaking. And I've alluded before, you do get better at this. So you do learn where your strengths are, and you do get that you can self-direct into the sort of areas where you feel you can add most value. But that's not necessarily a natural response at the beginning of your career. It is something that you learn as you develop your way through. So I would encourage everybody, and I say the same thing to my children, to find something that you enjoy, to do it to the absolute best of your ability, and success as a rule will follow. And if success looks like, moving into a leadership role, because 9 times out of 10 that tends to be the trajectory of career progression, then you will find that you do end up in that sort of position. And that's when it becomes incredibly important to seek out the role models, ensure you've got the support in place to help you on that journey. And if it doesn't happen to be your line management or anything close, then actively go out and look for places where it will come from. And so I would support everyone to do that. And I think that, in this day and age, the tools are there to do that and much more readily available than perhaps they were when we were at the beginning of our journeys. And whilst I very much admire and respect people who have a very clear view of where they want to end up with their career and are intent on getting there, and I have huge respect for them, that was never me. I wasn't that person. I was that person that you've heard Jackie and Jo talk about, who just wanted to do the best job they could, and then would start to look to do something a bit more, and then would start to think, well, I think I could do that because I can see them doing it, and I'm pretty sure I could do it, and I've done part of that, and it just kind of naturally took itself forwards. But I have to concede that the more senior you come, the more experienced you are, actually the better you become at kind of navigating your way through that, what can be a minefield at times, to kind of get to the place where you do feel you can be the best person you can, and you can add the most value, because this is where you've got the opportunity. And when I say to shine, it isn't about shining personally, it is about to make the greatest difference for the greatest benefit for the organisation you're working within.
Dr. Jackson?
Hi, I'm not sure what the question was now, but what I would say about leadership is I think leadership is happening everywhere, all around us, every second of every day. And it's where we observe it, whether it's in a tennis club or a fell running club or or an organisation or a charity or a cafe, you see it and you observe it. And I think it's well worth, I've always done an exercise called a leadership timeline, and it's what's on the positive side and what's on the negative side of what are the behaviours that each of us individually admire, and what do we really get offended by? So what type of leader do we want to be? And it's like picking people, just spend a day observing leadership in action and say, I like that, I don't like that. And it helps inform the person you want to be, because I think leaders have to be authentic and you have to be you. And you can learn skills and things along the way. But I think fundamentally, where we observe leadership happening, if everything is running absolutely seamlessly, there's good leadership in play there. You've experienced good leadership because nothing went wrong anywhere. How did that happen? I want it to be smooth. So it's kind of, think about what you admire in good leadership and what you really don't admire. And you can go back to school times, and you can go your parents, the influences of people. What made you irritated by them and what made you admire them? And then make your own list of what you want to be. That's what I would do.
I love that. And I'm actually going to take that to our next question. And if you remember your response that you just gave, Jackie Jackson, I'm going to start with you. I can see that as well in terms of identifying, it shouldn't be the case, but leaders that you respond to, people that you respond to in leadership roles, and kind of identifying why you do respond to it and why you don't respond to it. And as today's topic is Women's Equality Day, I am interested in the three of you, speaking on in your leadership roles, if you do or did, you don't have to give any information, experience any resistance to men with you in your leadership positions and how you dealt with that. Jackie Jackson, if you're okay to start.
I did. I suppose because I didn't really work in too many corporate environments, that the resistance was really when I was trying to prove myself that I had a valid voice that could be heard by others. And it's usually where you're up against something where you need something to change, or you feel that there's a change required somewhere in the system or the supply chain, or that something isn't quite working. Was for me that the hardest thing was working out, how do I get my voice heard in order to make the change I believe needed to be made, without just saying, it's not fair, you're not listening to me. It was kind of, how do I evidence why this change needs to happen? So I had to go about it in a different way. So I did have resistance, definitely. My way around it was to say, I've got to come up with the answer that they need. I've got to come up with a solution that will help them make the change. And I have to show that I've got a credibility somehow. So it wasn't enough for me to just say, it's not fair, I'm female. I've got to come up with, this is why this will work. What's the evidence behind the change we're going to make, and why is it going to be better for all of us? So that was my approach. I could have stood there and stamped my feet and said, this isn't fair, but I thought that was a bit of a waste of effort. I'll just try and get round it in a different way. So what will switch this change on for them? And then they might start to respect what I'm saying and my opinion sooner. But I think you have to earn respect. It's not a right. It's an earned commodity. So that's how I got around it. If I can't make them see that this change is good, then what do I need to do about that? And stamping my feet didn't seem an option.
That is great. Joe, you have a response for the question?
So there are two ways that I have experienced resistance from males in the workplace to me as a female leader. One is in terms of my development, my professional development. And I remember as if it was yesterday, and it wasn't yesterday, it was quite a long time ago. I'd just come back from having my first child. So I was on 4 days a week. I hadn't ramped back up to full time yet. 4 days a week, which is still really substantive. And often with our part-timers, this is just a quick aside, you get much more often from our part-time workers than sometimes you do with our full-time workers, because they feel they have a point to make and they work extremely hard and they're hugely well organised. But that's another issue we can talk about if you're doing a slot on agile working or part-time working or whatever. So I was 4 days a week, not long back after having my first child, and there was a particular training course I really wanted to go on. I proposed it to my line manager, who was a male, and he said very clearly and very confidently, you're part-time, not now. Come back to me when you're full-time, and I know you're serious about it. So I was young at the time and I took it and I accepted it, but not for very long. And the way I worked around it, because he wasn't for listening, he wasn't for changing his mind, I moved teams, I moved line managers, and I took my effort and energy and output to another team. Think of that as you will, but that was the right decision for me at the time. The second of the two ways that I have encountered resistance, and one example only recently in the past few weeks, and it's fascinating from an org psych perspective. As an organizational psychologist, it's just fascinating to watch. And that is somebody who I am a line manager for. He was a male, and he doesn't and has never liked having a female line manager. Now, I haven't come across this a lot, and I don't want to come out as somebody who says, oh, men never like women. I'm not saying that. I'm talking about this one individual who really struggles having a female line manager. The way I'm getting through it, the way I'm progressing this relationship in hopefully a positive way, is to just play things with a very, very straight bat. And by that, I mean, keep our conversations really fair, really transparent, listen a lot, explain the why a lot. So he's got no room, he's got no way to express anything other than fairness in our relationship. I'm leaving him no way out because he hasn't got any way out. There's no way for him to go with this. And a lot of what I think we need to do as females who are in leadership, or females who are aspiring to be in leadership, is to recognise that, and I don't want this to come out as condescending, I really don't mean it like that. It's an education for a lot of people that now we have very, very credible female leaders. So we need to educate people that that's how it is now, and you need to change.
That is wonderful. Jackie Arnold, do you have any?
Yeah, I mean, when I think about that, it's something that I have very rarely experienced. So I've generally led teams that are substantially male, latterly much more female in the team. And I've, very rarely experienced that. There have been a couple of occasions, which I will share with you, but in each of those instances, it's not actually been team members where I've experienced that resistance, but where the relationship has been slightly different. The first one was when I was much younger. So when I had my first son, Jo says she came back 4 days a week. There was no option for that. When I had my first son, it was you come back full time or you don't come back at all. We're not interested. And I decided that I would take a career break. And during that time, I lectured at a local further education college in business studies. I absolutely adored it, to be honest. It was another one of those highlights of my career. But there was, and generally speaking, I loved the students. I loved the, sharing of knowledge. I loved the atmosphere in the classroom. Most of the students were self-motivated because they were mature students putting themselves through this education. But there was this one particular class where there was an individual who clearly had an issue with me as a young woman, because I was only a young woman at the time, and probably younger than him, kind of teaching him through this qualification. And it was really tough for me because it was the first time I'd experienced anything like that. And he was very vocal and he was very difficult in the class. But, all you can do is continue to behave professionally and be rational, to listen, but explain how you were taking this forward. Not tolerate rudeness. You know, you have to be firm enough not to tolerate that sort of behaviour, but be fair in what you're saying. And it was a real salutary learning lesson for me, because I found after 3 weeks, I didn't need to deal with this individual anymore, because the rest of class just took him on, and that issue disappeared very quickly. And there was real learning in that for me. The other area where, you know, I have experienced resistance has not been in my team, and not actually been with peers, but with individuals who were in a collective in a more senior position to me. So in my kind of early days of reporting into a board of directors on issues for which I was responsible at that time, very rarely happened if it was financial, because I found that, you know, you'd walk into a room of people who weren't necessarily financial and their eyes glaze over and they're, well, would you understand it, Jackie? Yeah, get out and we'll do something more interesting. And that was fine. But when you were going in with a strategy, when you were talking about something that they were interested in and had a view and an opinion on, it became quite a different matter. And obviously, you know, my role going in there was to challenge thinking, to stimulate new ideas, to ensure that, you know, what we'd got would stand firm. And that at times was really difficult for me. And I do remember one particular instance where I was dragged into the MD's office afterwards and told that I shouldn't challenge these people because they were more senior in the organisation than me. And that was the point at which I thought, I've no idea what I'm doing in this organisation with you as the leader. This is time for me to move on, which I think is what you were indicating, Joe. You know, you fight, you do the right thing, you're absolutely confident in where you're going, but sometimes you have to accept that you're not going to win this battle, and it's time to move on. And I don't know if that's the right thing or not, but to be honest, that wasn't just going to be about me. That's a mentality that will pervade through an organisation when it's displayed at the top, and that's not something that meets with my morals and values, and therefore we're at a point where we really need to part company.
Thank you so very much, Jackie. And seeing at the time that we're at now, I feel like we need a part 2 to continue the conversation, because there's so many questions that I had that I haven't even touched on, of like benefits and barriers, and particularly imposter syndrome, because imposter syndrome is something that majority of people feel but don't feel like they want to or could talk about. And then when other people start talking about it, they're like, I feel that way too. Oh my gosh, you in this high position feel that way as well currently, right now? Okay, great. I'm in a perfect position. So we may need a part 2 to talk about that. I will invite those who are still with us. If you do have a question, please put it in the chat and or raise your hand with the reactions feature at the top of your screen if you are from on a desktop or a laptop computer, and you would like to audibly ask your question to Jackie Arnold, Jackie Jackson, or Joe. But so many things. I'll actually ask my last question, as to women may not realize that they want to become whatever leader definition they have in their mind of that. But what advice do you have for women who are just looking to grow in their companies, or those who are trying to step out and grow their own companies but may not feel too sure about making that move? Jackie.
I would kind of say find a mentor. If you're going to jump out into running your own thing, then find a good mentor or find somebody that can help you think out that plan. If you're going to be, I think, to become good leaders, I think you've got to know what a good leader looks like to you. And I think I would do that little piece of analysis on what a good leader is, what are the traits of good leaders for you, and how are you going to be your authentic person. And if you are going to lead, then make sure you are as diverse and inclusive across your teams as you can possibly ever be, because the ideas come from diversity, not from narrow thinking. So be as diverse as you as you can be. That's what I would say.
I would offer a piece of advice, which is be very careful who you listen to. In the early part of my career, I listened to people, usually men, because the split in the nuclear industry is about 20%, 80% in favour of men. So mostly there were men around me. In the early part of my career, I asked advice and took advice from what were mostly men, who was very much in terms of, oh, be careful, Joe, you know, maybe don't be brave, maybe just, you know, relax, take a bit longer and everything. And actually, I should just have had the courage of my convictions a lot earlier. So maybe it's counterintuitive, but be careful who you choose to listen to.
Yeah, and from my perspective, I would say, you know, if that is something that you're thinking about, then go for it. Because to suppress that for, you know, the sorts of reasons that we've been discussing today would never be the right thing. You'll be frustrated in your career. And if you're thinking about it, it's because you're observing it in someone else and think you can do it yourself. But I would ensure that you've got that support sitting around you, because I completely agree with Jackie. Finding a right mentor within a business is an excellent idea. Look for the sort of role model that you think that's a similarly, I respect that leader and this is why I respect them. And if that's something that, you know, if you could secure that sort of individual as your mentor, then that's perfect. But if you can't, continue with that observation, ask for help from time to time, and really don't shy away from it, because, you know, you will come across problems. Life is full of problems. Nothing ever is straightforward, but the rewards are substantial. Be true to yourself, and, you know, if you feel you have that capability, put the support network around you that you need, but go for it. Take a step into the unknown from time to time, and you will find that the rewards are tremendous.
Thank you so much. I don't see any questions in the chat. So with that being said, I'm going to close this out. Before I do, I just wanted to share a couple quotes that some of the panelists said today to leave you with for the rest of your day. Joe recently just said it, be careful who you listen to. And a couple of the panelists earlier have touched on the notion of being the best you wherever you are, working hard to be the best you that you can possibly be, instead of trying to not necessarily emulate some person, although Jackie Jackson mentioned earlier about looking at those types of qualities and characteristics of leaders that you do look up to, and kind of identifying what resonates best with you, and also identifying in yourself what your qualities are as well. I think that's something that we do need to continue reiterating to ourselves, to be the best us that we can be, and instead of trying to emulate what others are doing that may not work for our characteristics and personalities. And also, finally, on par with today's theme, which we will be doing some sort of part 2 in the future, we need to educate people that there are female leaders now and that things need to change. So with that, I end today's discussion. I want to thank our panelists, Jackie Arnold, Jackie Jackson, Joe Telfer, for joining us today. So very thankful. I want to also thank our audience who did join us. Thank you very, very much. And if you have any questions for us, for LUMS Careers after today, you can feel free to go to our website, lancaster.ac.uk/LUMS/careers, or you can email us at lumscareers@lancaster.ac.uk. And again, today's recording will be shared out within about a week of today. So enjoy the rest of your day, and thank you oh so much again. Bye, everyone.